name is Darla Hanley. I am the Dean of the Professional Education Division here at Berklee College of Music, and it is my thrill to welcome you to our 27th Zafris lecture. Each year we host this lecture to honor someone who has seriously and there's the sound, right? Who has seriously and significantly influenced the music industry with an original contribution and a lasting mark, creating vision and offering professional impact. It is our intent with this lecture to blur the lines between college education and real-world practice, bridging theory with practice, recognizing that new directions within the music industry are literally in this room. It is also our intent with the Zafris lecture to inspire you to think in new ways, reflect on professional goals, and learn from the experiences of a very successful industry professional. Those of you who know me know that I am quite proud of our institution, and I am proud of what Berklee stands for. We have such a highly acclaimed faculty and music business management department, a department with a wealth of expertise, experience, creativity, thoughtful vision, and drive. Please help me in acknowledging our music business faculty, our assistant chair, Tanya Butler, Andrew Lynn, project manager, and all of the majors, all of the music business majors who are in attendance today. So let's give them a rousing applause. Together, you are shaping the music industry of tomorrow. And so it begins. I'd like to take this opportunity now to recognize today as something that is particularly special in the history of our institution, and particularly special for the founding Chair of Music Business Management at Berklee College of Music, Don Gorder. Please put your hands together for Don. Don is retiring at the end of the summer, which makes this his final Zafris lecture as leader. Like forming the department, the Zafris lecture was started and has evolved for nearly 3 decades under Don's fine leadership. It has featured some of the industry's most influential and successful luminaries, like this afternoon. Don, we thank you for your many contributions, your vision for this event, your vision for music business education. Your influence is strong, it is far-reaching, and it is noticed. I keep saying this, we know you're retiring in August, and between now and then, you still have many more important Berklee moments ahead of you, like this amazing interview. Please put your hands together for Don Gorder.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Dean Hanley, for those very kind words. Good afternoon. Welcome to the 27th James G. Zafris Distinguished Lecture for Music Business Management. We were talking about the fact that this is the 27th, and it may very well be now the longest running annual event at Berklee. If it isn't, we're going to say it is anyway, So. But I always say this every year because I think it helps to understand where this event came from. The origin of this event goes back to 1992, when Berklee's Board of Trustees established a fund to support a lecture series for the new Music Business Management Department. And they named it in honor of the retiring chairman of the board, James G. Zafris. The Zafris Lecture has become a flagship event for our department, and I'm pleased to tell you that once again, Mr. Zafris is here with us today. Mr. Zafris. My first encounter with our speaker today was at a conference that Tanya Butler and I attended in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, where he was the keynote speaker. After he spoke, I remember Tanya and I looking at each other and saying, we have to get him to Berklee. Well, we pulled it off. As most of you know, and as Dean Hanley just told you, I'm retiring this summer. So if this is the last introduction of a Zafris lecture that I make, I'm pleased to be going out on a high note with the event today. A Boston native, Jeff Harleston earned a BA in political science from Williams College and a JD from Bolt Hall School of Law at UC Berkeley. That's that other Berkeley on the West Coast. Following a stint as a prosecutor with the federal government, he pivoted to the music industry in 1993, joining MCA Records, which is now Universal Music, as Associate Director of Business and Legal Affairs. I read that he consulted Donald Passman's All You Need to Know About the Music Business, we know that book, as a guide to negotiating his first record deal. My goodness. Just shows, it's a valuable book. We still use it. But now, 27 years later, having risen to his current position of General Counsel and Executive Vice President of Business and Legal Affairs at Universal Music Group Worldwide, the world's largest music company by market share, he helms a team of 150 lawyers and oversees all business transactions, contracts, and litigation for UMG operations worldwide. His position brings him into contact with a steady stream of artists who are anxious to be signed by a UMG-affiliated label, such as Interscope's Juice WRLD and Billie Eilish, Island's Jessie Reyez, as well as superstars like Universal Republic's Taylor Swift. Jeff has been honored numerous times for his philanthropy, community service, and industry expertise. In the interest of time, I'll highlight just a few. In 2018, he received the Lifetime Music Industry Award from the T.J. Martell Foundation for his service in supporting cancer research. Also, in 2018, he was named Lawyer of the Year by Billboard and ranked number 1 on its list of the top 100 music attorneys in the country. Just a few weeks ago, he was presented by the Recording Academy with the 2020 Entertainment Law Initiative Service Award, the annual honor that celebrates attorneys who have demonstrated a commitment to advancing and supporting the music community through service. At the event, Universal Chairman and CEO Sir Lucian Grange called Jeff a brilliant attorney with an ear for talent and a mind for business, and went on to say, he's also a man who never forgets that beyond any transaction, it's ultimately the artists who matter most. As Jeff knows, it's their talent and their work that actually inspire fans from generation to generation. I think that we here at Berkeley can't help but resonate with an endorsement like that. So please welcome Jeff Harleston. So glad to have you here. My goodness.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you guys for coming. I didn't know if the room was going to be full, but it is. All right. It's because Mr. Zafris is here, I'm sure.
Well, you have your background, your upbringing here in Boston. We talked a little about that growing up. Medford, Lexington.
Yeah, I was born just a few blocks from here, and my dad was actually on the faculty at Tufts, so we lived on campus for several years, and then moved out to Lexington for junior high and high school, and then I got out of town.
Was there any
warmer weather?
was there music in your family life growing up?
There was, yeah. Music has always played a fairly significant role in my life, not because I had any discernible talent, but my grandmother was the organist in church, so that was the first start, and so there was a lot of music that was always playing somewhere in our house at various points in time, and it's always been kind of a through line in my life.
So you went to law school and started working as a prosecutor for the federal government.
Yeah. I went to law school to be a trial lawyer. Actually, between undergrad and law school, I worked for 3 years in advertising in New York because I wanted to do something different. I wasn't ready to go back to school. But when I knew it was time to go, I knew that I wanted to be in the courtroom trying cases, and I went to, as you mentioned, the other Berkeley for law school, which was a wonderful experience and a great kind of balance for growing up here and living there. But then D.C. seemed a natural place to go, so I went to a firm, Covington & Burling in D.C., as a litigator, and worked on various litigations. But one of the reasons I went to the firm was they advertised and billed themselves as having a very active pro bono practice, which they did. And it was through the pro bono work that I got a lot of experience in the courtroom. And that kind of bled back into the firm, saying, hey, this guy can actually handle himself on his feet. And so I got a little more experience there. And then I was asked to join a prosecution unit. It was similar to what we've just been through with Robert Mueller, but many of you, as I look at the faces in this room, were not born then. It was a scandal that came out of the Reagan administration, Iran-Contra. So I was one of the prosecutors on the Iran-Contra investigation and prosecution, the last 2 years of it. And it was the best job I ever had. It was fantastic. I learned a lot, had a couple of very big trials, got a big conviction, and it was great.
But then you pivoted to music, and
It's natural, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's wait to see what
go from Iran.
Wait to see what
to
Donald
music.
Trump does when he leaves office, right? Yeah. No, it was so when these things end, these special prosecutions, you kind of like it's kind of abrupt, and you have to figure out what your next move is. So the options were go back to the firm, which once you've been at a firm and you're out, not the most attractive option. Then it was like, I do like this prosecutor thing, so maybe I join a U.S. attorney's office and become a career prosecutor. Oh, that's an idea. And then I got a call from a classmate of mine from law school, and she was in L.A., and she was working for this record company called MCA, and she said, you know what? I don't know what you're going to do next, but we're hiring some lawyers. I think you'd be great at this. You should send your resume. And I was like, come on, I'm a prosecutor. She said, just send it anyway. And I sent my resume, and they loved it, I think because it was different. And they flew me out to L.A., and I interviewed, and I was like, this will be kind of fun. Yeah. So that's how it happened.
But no prior experience in entertainment law before that?
No prior experience in entertainment law at all. In fact, no prior experience in transactional law. I mean, again, I was a litigator, so I'd never really done a deal.
Yeah.
So it was a big change.
And that's a true story that you looked at Passman's book when you did your first record deal?
I looked at Passman's book when I did my, and the only thing I'll say about, look, I love Don. We're very close now. It's nice I can say that, Don, right? Yeah. But as I look at, it was even when I was reading it through, it was like, God, this is really from the artist's perspective, which of course it is. But it helped me through it. It was the challenge is, even in law school, you can take classes related to intellectual property, and some law schools might even have classes on copyright, and some might even have some entertainment law classes that Berkeley didn't really have those. But even still, it's very, very hard to learn the music business in particular, but I would say any entertainment business, from a book. You have to live it. You have to actually do it. And so it was helpful. But my first year at the record company, I thought was going to be my last, because there were some very, very cloudy days. And then there were some partly sunny days, and then they became more sunny days as I started to figure out what it all meant.
Yeah.
But it was, the thing that I think was most challenging to me was, lawyers in the music business, historically, it's gotten better, but historically can never say what they really mean, right? So it'd be like saying, if we go across the street, we can buy a hamburger, notwithstanding the foregoing, if there's a milkshake on Wednesdays. Just like say what you mean, right? No one would ever say what they meant. It was always kind of around, you had to read 7 sentences to get the point. And so one of the things that I've always worked on is like, why can't we just find ways to say things much more simply, right? Just simplify it. And of course, the people I mean, my bosses were all like, no, 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 no. Do not disturb it. That's precedent. We can't change that. That's the way everyone understands it works. And I'm like, no one can understand that. It doesn't make any sense. But over time, as our business evolved, it became, I think, pretty obvious that we had to change some of the ways.
So you're saying those 60-page record contracts are getting shorter, or?
Well, no. They've actually now grown to about 70 pages, only because what the 60-page contracts don't reflect is all the new ways that music is exploited today. So you have to now have pages and pages to account for what happens when 12 seconds of a song are used on TikTok or something, right? So it's actually added on. But a lot of the other aspects of it I think have become much more simplified.
Yeah. Well, you started at MCA in 1993, which sometimes
The
we
same
call
year
it,
the Zafris lecture started, if I'm not wrong.
That's about right.
Come
Yes,
on,
that's
27
right.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah.
There's a symmetry here.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
But sometimes we refer to that as the Roaring '90s,
Right.
because I mean the record companies were selling CDs by the boatload, and you got in right in the midst of that. But things kind of changed, didn't they? Or right around the end of that decade. We're here to talk about change, and just to give it context, I've always been curious because you were there inside the walls of a major label when the big change all started, which of course was Napster. What was going on then?
Yeah, it was when I first started. You're absolutely right. I had about 4 of the really great glory years. I mean, there was the excess and all that was amazing. It was fun. But what happened one day was this thing called Napster, and it's like imagining that you had built a business. Like if you had a grocery store and you'd built this grocery store over time, and everybody came to your grocery store to buy your groceries, and then one day you found out that when you went home at night, everyone was coming in the back door, which wasn't locked, and taking the groceries, and then not coming to your store anymore. And so we had to figure out how to fix that. And when it happened, it was interesting because it's like the only thing I can analogize it to is like the first time when I was a kid and I saw my parents like really concerned about something. When you look at your, there's a period in your life when you look at your parents, they're like, oh, they can weather anything, and then you see them like, oh my God, they're really shook. This is serious, and that's what it looked like, because people were kind of literally moving around the company and in the industry with a very concerned point of view. And then there were some who felt, yeah, there's this thing, file sharing and the internet, whatever this thing is, or what do they call it? The information superhighway, I think they called it first. It was a goofy name. But it's okay because we control the content, and as long as we control the content, they can do nothing without us. There was this really, that was a minority, but there were certain people who definitely were kind of stuck on repeat. But it became evident very quickly, and by very quickly, probably within a 6 to 9 month period, that the back door of the store was not going to be able to be locked anytime soon, and that we were going to have to figure out whether we built a new store or whether we just, or all just left. It wasn't clear, but it was a disruption, the level of which I don't think any industry has experienced quite to the degree music did, because the music files were small enough that they were easily shared. Back then there certainly wasn't 5G, and the internet speed would to download a video file would be like press download and leave for like a day, but the music files were easily transferable. So we were getting hit. Film, TV business not touched at all. Books were kind of on the precipice, but not really. And we were really the canary in the coal mine, and it was scary.
So it was that you had to deal with, and then of course the first legal service. Well, there were a couple of them, but the first one that really caught on, of course, was iTunes. But but they're selling singles. You know, I mean, the companies were making a fortune selling CDs. If you heard a song on the radio, you wanted that song, you go down and buy the $18 CD. Well, iTunes, that went away, so you had to deal with that too.
Yeah, there were a number of attempts to try and find a new model that didn't work. Apple was the first one when they introduced iTunes that, like, this is easy to use, it made sense, people liked it, it was clean, it was, you know, it looked and felt great. The only thing was that everything was now 99 cents, and everything was detachable. So, you know, the days of listening to a record from start to finish on an album, you know, with the liner notes and all that was gone, and the experience changed. Not necessarily for the worse, but for a generation of people, it felt like, oh my God, Armageddon. The one thing I do think that changed, that I'm not sure is for the better, was that you took a product or a creation that is the furthest thing from a commodity and made it a commodity. I mean, a sound recording or a musical composition for that matter, they're like snowflakes. No two are the same. You can have the same artist record the same song 50 times in the same day, and each take is going to be different. But, you know, to make it work, you know, Steve Jobs decided everything would be 99 cents. And, you know, if that got the back door of the supermarket closed up, we all accepted it.
Well, the upshot is that the revenue in the record companies plummeted over the next few years, and so, you know, now
15 years, Don. 15 years of decline.
Yeah,
It was brutal. It was a very tough 15 years of decline.
Well, that's what I want to know, to hear your thoughts, though. I mean, what went on in those 15 years to try to bring it back? What did the record labels do to turn this around?
Well, during the period of great decline, you know, several things happened. You know, the first is, you know, I got a speed kind of course on, I guess I never went to business school, but I feel like I went to business school over that period of time because I got a speed lesson on consolidation. You had several labels that were then merged into one or two or three, which was painful because most of these labels were legendary. Let me back up. The music business is really only about 100 years old as far as recorded music. And the modern music business is really only about, let's call it 60 years or 70 years of that 100 years. So he's starting about mid to late 50s, what I call the modern day of the music business, where you know there were singles and albums and all these kinds of things as we know it. So in that period of time, some wonderful companies started that were companies that had personality, companies that were unique to the founder. Labels like Motown, we all know, that was Berry Gordy's company and what that meant and the importance of Motown. Island Records, a guy named Chris Blackwell from Jamaica, and he signed iconic artists from Bob Marley to U2 and many in between. You know, A&M, that's Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss, started an incredible record company in California. Companies like that were then being consolidated into other companies, and so the personalities were at risk of being lost, and that was a very painful period of time. So that was going on, and while that was going on, when you're consolidating 3 labels into one or 4 labels into one, it's not that if each of those labels had 100 artists signed, it's not like the new label was going to have 400 artists signed. It meant the new label was going to have 100 artists signed. And if there were 400 employees, it doesn't mean, or 100 employees at each label, it didn't mean they'd have 400 employees. It meant the new label would have 100 employees and 100 artists. And so what happened to the rest of them? So a lot of people lost their jobs and had to find other things to do. And a lot of artists were not able to have the benefit of that kind of experience and you know, in terms of getting their career underway or supported and things like that. So it was a very, very tough time. At the same time, the labels at the label level we had to rethink what our company did, because we still had to find great artists. We had to help them make the best records they possibly could. We had to help, we had to provide marketing and promotion and publicity for these records that was world class. That always had to happen. But at the same time, we had to start thinking about other things. There were departments that never existed in a record company before that started to emerge that were called new media at first, then merged into digital. But we started hiring people that had engineering backgrounds, not music or recording engineering backgrounds, but electrical and civil kind of engineering backgrounds. And we had to bring in people who are very facile with technology to help us navigate where this was all going.
Fair to say fewer signings going on during these years?
Far fewer signings going on. And far fewer signings going on, and a lot more pressure on the signings that had happened. For example, when I first started, there was a standard deal we'd do for, at the time the genre was really alternative rock, and that the standard signing was, we'd sign an artist for 3 albums. We'd sign them for probably 7 albums, but the first 3 would be, guaranteed. And what went along with that was they'd get a van and a trailer and a bunch of tour support. And we basically said, make your first album, go on the road, don't come back for a year, come back in a year, make your second record, go on the road, don't come back for a year. And then the third one is when we expect to, that's you're gonna need to take time, practice your craft, build your audience, build your fan base. That went away. The first thing that was cut was artist development. That was not something that was a luxury for a record company to have in the mid 2000s, really all the 2000s, I would say, to about 2010.
Yeah. Well, I just read in Billboard 2 days ago, the headlines were, Universal Music Group is firing on all cylinders. So, I mean, what do you attribute to that? I mean, it's been 20 years now since Napster, this process, as you just characterized it, we had to rebuild the store. How did you do that so that you're now firing on all cylinders?
Well, a few things happened. That the industry came together really nicely and worked together to try and figure out new models. But and part of that was starting to empower new services that were coming along that might have been 5 or 10 years earlier viewed as a threat. It was now the viewpoint was, we've got to try and work with these guys and help them build their business, because that's the only way we're gonna succeed. An example, Spotify is a great example, right? So this odd Swedish company is born, Spotify, and really there was some Sweden had one of the worst piracy problems ever, and so much so that the piracy was even a political party. There was like a piracy party, pirate party in Sweden, and the government stepped in and really helped subsidize the creation of a service like Spotify to help address the piracy problem. So there's this thing, Spotify, that's really working in Sweden, and a lot of people were fearful, but slowly there was a kind of a change in attitude, and that there had to be an element of support for a service like that. So maybe we do some things we wouldn't typically do, and maybe we'd license them and expect less of a return at the beginning till they got up to a certain level of business, and then we could have a proper commercial negotiation with them. And that's really what happened with Spotify, and it took a long time for them to launch in the U.S. because the independent record labels really took the lead in Europe in supporting them. Some of the majors did. Like, for example, my company, we licensed them outside the U.S. for probably 3 years before we licensed them in the U.S. And so we had to do things like that to help build it along the way. One of the reasons why that article, our company is hitting it on all cylinders, is our chairman had a strategic viewpoint that the music business would come back. So he invested when others were maybe not. Like some companies were taking a more conservative standpoint, saying let's just hold firm. We have a big catalog. We can live off of our catalog, but we're not going to invest in new artists. Our company took a different philosophy and invested heavily. And even the acquisition of EMI was one example of that, where we kind of tried to bring back Capitol Records and boost it up, so that when the tide turned, we were better positioned for growth.
Yeah. But regarding Spotify and the other services, the royalty issue, lots of complaining from the artist community, still going on. It seems like the labels are complaining less.
We're just tired, Don.
Oh.
We're just tired of complaining, but no, we're still complaining. Yes.
Yeah. Is that going to set itself right eventually?
I don't know. I mean, the royalty issue is, there's two things going on, as I can tell. But there's a lot of complaints in the artist community that they're not getting paid enough. Artists are not being compensated fairly, and songwriters as well, for exploitation on streaming services. And there's two things going on. The first I will say is in the old days, it was really simple. If you sold a record, you could generally get a sense of, what am I going to make a record based on my deal? If I have a royalty that's paying me, say, 10 cents, you would usually assume that if I'm getting, 10%, if I'm getting 10% in a physical or even a download world, I could probably analogize that to I'm getting somewhere like 80 cents to $1 a record. There's a relatively firm numbers. Then you could look and say, my record came out last week, I sold X number of units, therefore I must have made Y amount of money, right? In the current environment, in the current digital marketplace, it doesn't work that way. First of all, there are a variety of different services. Every one of those services is structured a slightly different way. So, for example, Apple Music, very simple. If you want Apple Music, you pay your $9.99 a month, you get Apple Music. That's fine. Straight subscription. They might give you 90 days free or something like that. There might be a family plan, but that's basically it. But then you go to Spotify, well, there's different tiers. There's a free ad-supported tier where I don't have to pay anything. Maybe I'll get some ads. Not many, so it's actually not that bad a proposition. Or I can pay more and I can get no ads and maybe a little more functionality. I'm not sure if it's meaningful functionality or not, but there's a choice there. So now you have, when Spotify says, oh, your record came out and you were streamed 1 million times, the first question is, of those 1 million streams, how many of them were in the free service versus the paid service? So because the economics on the per stream basis is very different. But the sense you're getting already, as I can look at your faces, is I've only talked about 2 services, and this is wildly complicated, right? This is really, really difficult. And then you multiply that. We have over 420 individual digital music services licensed around the world. Over 420. Every one of them is a little bit different. So it's very hard, if you're from the artist perspective, to even understand what I'm getting. All I know is I'm getting a statement from a company, and it says this is what I've earned. What I read in Billboard was I was the second most streamed artist this month. This doesn't jive. How could that be? And it's so there. I mean, there's some real issues of what people throw around the term transparency. What I would call that's really the transparency issue, is what is going on there, and that's something that the labels try to explain, but it's hard, and it's hard to bring everybody on this journey because it's happened so quickly that not everybody understands the nuances of it and how to explain it. The other side, the other issue, which is one that affects everyone, is the streaming, the share of the $9.99, say, a month. What is that, and how is that? Not how it's divided so much between artist and record company, but as between platform and content. And in most instances, it's roughly a 50-50 split. And if I were running Coca-Cola company right now, and I went to, a supermarket chain and said, I'm going to sell you Coca-Cola. And they said, great, for every dollar we get from the selling your Coke, I'm going to take 50 cents of it. I'd say I'd find another supermarket because I came up with the syrup and the recipe and the can, and I've just spent all this marketing on the Super Bowl, which is why they went into your store and bought it. It's very odd to have a distribution model where a distributor is taking 50% of the gross. But, that's the world we live in, and to the defense of the platforms, they're all saying they have a hard time being profitable. And not to go way down the rabbit hole with you guys, but the difference between music is different than any other content. You can't analogize it to film and TV. And you look at a platform like Netflix. Netflix works on a model where they buy everything out. So if they're, Bird Box, the movie, or whatever that movie was, right? They bought Bird Box for whatever they spent. And it's a one-time cost. And if Bird Box is streamed once, or if Bird Box is streamed 20 million times, Netflix investment is the same. Music is different because music, the more it's streamed, the more they're paying. So for their services, they're having a hard time kind of finding, I think, their own business equilibrium. I know I got really heavy on you guys for a minute, but it's complicated. This is really, really complicated stuff.
The more people streaming, the more streams that are coming out, the lower the overall royalty rate becomes, because they're dividing up that pie with so many more streams all the time.
Well, there's two things. There's that, and then there's the, for them running a business, if I'm getting a title, if I'm getting, a new single from Drake, and for every stream of that single, I'm paying out a certain amount. It's hard, right? Because you're only getting $9.99 a month. So the more that's every stream is requiring some amount to be paid, and so it's a little bit harder.
Yeah.
But it's a different thing, and even from the artist perspective, there's a quiet debate going on really in the artist community. I don't think the labels really have much of an opinion on it, which is they call it a user-centric model. That should a streaming platform compensate the artist based on what the individual consumer listens to? What I mean by that is, if I pay $10 a month to Apple or Amazon or Spotify, it doesn't matter, and all I listen to is U2, then should my $10 a month only go to U2? Or should it be pooled, as it is now, and be divided up among everybody that's streaming on the platform? Interesting model. But what you've lost in the streaming model is, and what you had in the earlier world was, even in download, you had a transactional element where if I put out my record on the same day as you, and it's arguable whether you or I are the most popular artists in the world, but so we both put out records out on the same day. In the old world, we could battle it out and we could both sell a lot of records. In a streaming world like this, it's a closed universe, so we can battle it out, but we're still splitting a closed universe of pie, right? If there's 100 million paid subscribers in the world, then we're going to divide up that 100 million paid subscribers, revenue evenly. And so so what artists are now figuring out is, I don't want to come out when Dawn's coming out because I'll make more money if I come out a week later.
Well, these are all the complications that are, I'm sure, part of your world on a daily basis.
I used to have hair when I started. We should have started there. If you saw a picture of me 27 years ago, you wouldn't even recognize it. I used to have hair. I was about 20 pounds lighter. Yeah, it's been
All right. Well, let's transition a little bit here to artists and signings. Part of the digital revolution, if you wanted to call it that, it created this environment where all of a sudden everybody's saying, level the playing field, artists, they don't need labels anymore. All these tools are there, and you can sell it, you can book your own tours, everything, such that the feeling was, why are we going to continue to need record labels? So what are your thoughts? I mean, you're with a major label. Obviously, major labels have not gone away. So when it comes down to an artist having to make that long-range choice, do they still aspire to be signed by a major, by an indie, to go it alone? What enters into that thought process?
Well, one thing that is, one of the things that's come out of this whole digital revolution in music is it's very fast changing, so it's dynamic, but it's also incredibly empowering because there's a lot more choice. There's more choice for consumers, and there's more choice for artists. It is the barriers to entry in terms of even making a record have come way down, right? So I think it's the making of the record part is a lot easier, and the distribution of the record or the recording is a lot easier. And because you have so many various options, you could, you actually have the menu where I can go, if I really just want to get it on a platform, I can upload it myself onto certain platforms, or some need, if I need to go through a TuneCore or CD Baby or something, I could do that. There's lots of ways to get your music out there, which is great, because it should be all about choice. Everything, that's if I could say, if they said there's one thing you could overlay on the digital revolution, what would it be? And it would be, the word would be choice. It should be the choice of the artist as to how they want their music presented or made available to fans. It should be the choice of the copyright owner as to whether their music should be made available for free or not. And it should be the choice of the consumer as to how they consume that. So I think the choice part is wildly empowering, a little bit frightening, but very good overall. What happens is, in my opinion and experience is, artists choose labels for a variety of reasons. Some artists, I'll use artists that I'm involved with, right? Some artists, Drake doesn't need our company to make a record. He's really good at that. We don't really have to be involved in that. But there are certain things that we do on the marketing, promotion, sales, distribution side that are helpful. That's where we can lend support. Other artists need help. Some artists need help finding good songs. Some artists need help finding good producers. Some artists actually find great songs and good producers, but need help discerning which are the best, or which might be more commercial if that's what they're trying to be, or which might be a risk that they should take that maybe they otherwise wouldn't want to take. So some need that muse in their life or that creative spark to help them. And they can find that, they can potentially find that in an individual that works at a company like mine, or that works at a company that's smaller or independent. But I think artists are making their choice for a lot of different reasons. The really cool and empowering aspect is the A&R process has changed a bit. People still go to gigs. People still listen to files now as opposed to CDs or tapes. But a lot of it, there is still the ability to get noticed, to get awareness on your own and drive a deal that way, should that be what you want to do, is a path that wasn't there 8 years ago.
Yeah, but I'm sure you've heard that, major labels sometimes get bashed by those who say, you sign with a major and what they want is instant hits. If you don't have a quick hit, then, you're dropped and your career's over. I mean, that's an extreme comment, but I'm interested in how you would respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be good and bad stories everywhere. Yeah. But we'll use a real world example. Billie Eilish was signed 4.5 years ago. If anybody thinks that that was a microwave project, that was a project that she was signed 4.5 years ago. There was a lot of time and effort. She worked really hard. She wrote amazing songs with her brother. Yes, in her bedroom. That is true. They still live at home and work. She does. I don't think he does anymore, but they still do that. And what happened was it was a deliberate artist development move. Her first paid gig ever was in London, put together by our UK company a year and a half after she'd been signed by Interscope Records in the US. By the time her album came out, she had visited probably 15 territories around the world, and so in support of her release, so people knew that this was coming. There was not a drop of radio airplay on her album before it came out, or anything. She had some songs but they weren't really getting airplay. They were getting the streaming services were helping a great deal. So there are great artist development stories there and in other places too. I mean, I don't think any situation is unique. But the one thing I'll say is, you've got any artist has to figure out where they're most comfortable and where they feel their dreams will be most fulfilled and where they feel that they will have whatever they feel they need. So artists are people. Some artists want to be told what to do. Some artists want to tell others what they want done for them. And it's just a matter of finding a place that has the balance.
If an artist makes the choice, I'm gonna do it myself. What kinds of skills do you think they need to have if they're really going to make a career?
3 skills. I mean, other than creative ability, which is always a plus when you're an artist. They need to have imagination. They need to have tenacity. You cannot give up. You need to have tenacity. It's like, I have some friends who are actors, and I've watched their careers. They get told no more often. I'm sure a psychiatrist would have a field day with them because they're just used to being told no, and it's just part of their, went on 6 auditions last week. Didn't get in, but I got another one, It's just that. You have to have tenacity. Imagination, tenacity, and a sense of fearlessness. You have to be fearless. You have to take chances. You have to be willing to take risks. That's where, most of the great, kind of breaking stories, somewhere along the line, there was a risk.
I think for any artist, probably the biggest challenge is, of course, they want to make great music, but how do they get to the people? How do they find their fans? How do they find their audience, and so forth? If it's with a label or if it's with theirself, what are those challenges?
Again, it's, welcome to the new world. That's the easiest part now. Social media, for better or worse, is critical. And then, there's a concept now, you guys have probably heard it, of always on, right? It's most important to be always on. It doesn't matter, that you're always releasing music as much as that you're always communicating with your fan base in some way, shape, or form, and whatever your flavor of social media might be. But it's very, very important. In fact, we have some artists that are like household names and have had very long and successful careers, but are on a cycle where they put out albums every 3 to 4 years. And for them, it's hard because they don't have that immediate presence. They don't have that constant presence. Then there's artists like, Rihanna, amazing, right? It's been 5.5 years since she put an album out. But her social media is fire. It doesn't matter. It'll be fine. So it's about being present and being in the moment and continuing to connect with your fans. And what the fan experiences today is different than what it was 10 years ago. Having the ability to purchase a merch item, like maybe it's if say you have a fashion line like a lipstick or even a hair tie or a T-shirt or something, has some of the same emotional reward of going to that concert that you would have had. It's remarkable. I mean, there's been a lot of kind of consumer insight research that's reflected that, and it's just a very different level of relationship. So, and I think that that's not something that's age bound. You know what I mean? I don't think it's only with a necessarily younger fan population or younger artist. I was talking recently with the estate of James Brown, and I was saying to them, what, and it's very interesting. So just a little sidelight. So when James Brown died, in his will, he left half of his estate to create a fund for at-risk youth in the state of South Carolina, which is where he's from. The other half is divided among his very disparate and not necessarily communal family. So they're a mess. So the state basically runs the estate. So now you're dealing with the state attorney general from South Carolina, who was smart enough several years ago to hire somebody to manage the estate who's actually an accountant, nothing to do with the music business. So, but they're responsible and they're managing the thing pretty well. But we were talking. The point of the story is we were talking about things to do with James Brown, and I said your social media presence is like nothing. I mean, well, James isn't living. I said I'm aware of that, but what you can do is, I said, James Brown has a great reputation, particularly in the hip hop community. I mean, a lot of hip hop producers sample him regularly, have for years. And he was an iconic guy. I mean, why don't you just start a Twitter? I mean, just, or an Instagram, whatever, how we do that? I said, just come up with a handle, Real James Brown or something, and have James weigh in on the debate last night, or 2 nights ago. Oh, Bloomberg really got his butt kicked, I feel good. You could put it out there, right? And then, people would follow. They're like, oh, that's brilliant. Oh, how do we do that? Just do it. I mean, there's so many options. It's not hard. And so, like I'm saying, I don't think it's necessary. You don't have to be like a teen idol to be able, obviously it works for a guy like Justin Bieber sometimes, but it can also work for other artists as well.
I have to ask you this, and you can tell me how much you can talk about it, but I think everybody out here knows that Taylor Swift left her prior album, Big Machine, and signed with Universal. I assume you negotiated that deal with her attorney, who happens to be Donald Passman.
Don Passman, yes.
You told me a little story on the phone a couple of weeks ago about the setting when you and Don negotiated that deal.
Oh, again, like I said, I still get goosebumps. I can call him Don. Don, we actually ended up going to his office and sat in a conference room, and it was it was calm, professional, and extremely pleasant. Again, it's one of the benefits of dealing with somebody who really knows their stuff. So it was straight to the point. But at a certain point in time, it was like, whoa, it's about 12:45. Should we get some lunch? I was like, yeah, that'd be good. I thought he was gonna, do the traditional Chinese pizza. What do you want? And order something in. But no, he said, I made a reservation at a little spot around the corner. And his office is right in downtown Beverly Hills. So we walked out and we walked about 3 blocks to the restaurant. A beautiful sunny day. It was really very nice. Had an hour and a half lunch at a very nice Italian restaurant and walked back and resumed the negotiation. It was great.
So nobody wrestling each other to the ground?
No wrestling to the ground. Not that doesn't happen. Not that doesn't happen. I mean, I've never been involved in any of that stuff, but I've heard some crazy stories over the years.
Yeah. Well, one of the aftermaths of that was when she came out and said she's going to re-record her songs. Is that going to happen?
You'd have to ask Taylor. I do not know.
Okay. I'll assume that her contract speaks to that in some way, but I won't ask you to say.
If it was negotiated by a good lawyer, I'm sure it does.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we know the answer to that. All right. What about? I have to ask you this too. Your thoughts about? There's been a rampant amount of copyright infringement suits. They just keep proliferating. It seems like every time you turn around, there's another one. I think it all kind of started, if you might agree, with the Blurred Lines and the Marvin Gaye, and it's just kind of gone from there. And now we had Led Zeppelin, and we have Katy Perry, and what's going on with that?
Well, there's been. I would just take issue with one element of how you framed it. There's been a lot of claims of copyright infringement, and this is what the term that I use and others use is kind of the sound-alike thing, right? This is about musical compositions, not about masters, where people, one artist or songwriter is claiming that another artist or songwriter has infringed on their copyrighted musical composition. And it did, the first was, that I recall, I think Blurred Lines was the first experience, certainly that I had with it. Little sidelight. So Robin Thicke is our artist, recording for Interscope Records. As I mentioned, we own Motown. Motown has all of the Marvin Gaye recordings. So the claim is made by the Marvin Gaye estate against Robin Thicke, which was, immediately. I mean, I'll tell you a story. My son's here; he might remember. My mother-in-law was visiting, and we all got in the car to go somewhere, dinner or something, and the kids had the radio on, and she goes, Blurred Lines came on. She goes, oh, finally a song. This is one of my songs from back in the day. And then T.I. started rapping. She goes, that's not my song. It's like, yeah. So there was, yes, there was some similarity. The thing about that case that was, I think, probably more eventful than it got headlines for, and really, I think, had a marked effect on the outcome, which was, a decision of infringement and a verdict, which I believe is on appeal. So I'm limited by what I can say, as we are a party to that. But one of the key elements were the witnesses. There were musicologists on both sides, and as professionals in the music business that you all are, you can generally find musicologists in most instances that can fall on either side of one of these issues. So, okay, there were musicologists on both sides. But when the producer, Pharrell, and the artist, Robin, were asked to testify on this issue, that's when things really didn't go so well. Pharrell was, I don't know whether he was nervous, probably, but didn't come across very well in the courtroom and wasn't very forthcoming and very defensive. And there was actually some videotape depositions where you have an opportunity to examine somebody before the trial on the record. And so that wasn't so good. But it paled in comparison to Robin, who decided that his defense was he had no idea what he was doing. He just went into the studio high on drugs and did whatever they told him to do. And I think the jury hated them. And it would have found it against them in any circumstance. It was very disappointing. It also didn't help that in support of the record, Robin went on just about every late night talk show and said, with Blurred Lines, I wanted to create an homage to Marvin Gaye. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And I wanted to get a feel for a Marvin Gaye song. So it was, that was also, a lot of those clips were played at the trial. But yeah, it it's an interesting thing. So it's now given birth to a lot of these claims, and you know, the Led Zeppelin thing, which I guess it's now on appeal, but they successfully beat that one back. I mean, there was one of our artists, Sam Smith, was it Stay With Me? There was a claim from Tom Petty, maybe it was the Tom Petty estate at that point, but I can't remember. I'm not sure if he had passed at that point, but there was a claim that he had infringed on a Tom Petty song. And, you know, if you've ever met Sam, which I have, the likelihood of Sam Smith having that in his repertoire of songs to go to in writing Stay With Me is really a long shot. I mean, but the claim was made public like 3 weeks before the Grammys when he was nominated for Best Song, and so I think the decision to make a quiet settlement was probably the right thing to do. But you know, it just fawns more and more of this. Look, I'm all for artists. You know, we defend our copyrights as copyright owners all the time, and I'm fully in favor of it. But in many of these instances, you know, there's gradations and lines as to, you know, what is in the spirit and in the style of versus what is actually, you know, infringing on someone else's work. And so I think that you know, to take that into a jury is a dangerous place to go.
You talked about advice for artists who are trying to break in. What about on the business side? We have a lot of our business majors here. They want to break in on the business side. What advice can you give them?
They don't call it the music business for nothing, right? Someone told me when I started, it's the music business. It's not music. I'm like, I didn't understand that for like 5 years. But there is a business side to it, which is fairly developed. And I would encourage any of you that want to go that route. I think there's great opportunities. Again, I would actually say that the same 3 elements apply, because, you know, imagination is really, really important. Tenacity is like, you know, job one, and you have to be fearless within the realm of like not like crazy, you know, because there's a little bit of parents and children, and you got to be a little parent. You can be like the cool parent, but you still have to be a parent. So my advice is for trying to find a way in. There's kind of 2 ways you can go. You can take whatever job you want that you can get to get into the business, and then kind of navigate once you're in, and that's an acceptable way. There definitely is a bias in favor of those who are kind of in the business doing something versus those coming from out. So there is, you know, whether it's, you know, and I'm talking like even, you know, an assistant answering somebody's phones and someone's desk, something like that. It's, you know, these are all ways in. The only thing I would say is nothing is more obvious than when someone's in a job that they don't want to do, right? Like, or even in a department where they don't want to be. You know, we've had people start in the legal department because they could get a job there, but they really want to be in A&R. It's so visible that it's like, it can be like defeating career-wise. So if you really don't want to be in licensing, but that's the job that's available, if you can hold on a little bit longer and get something that's a little more favorable, that's fine. But, you know, or understand that that's the job you're in. And the most important thing is whatever you're doing, be the best at whatever it is. If you're the you know, the photocopier repair person, that's what they assign you to do. Be the best photocopier repair person. Trust me, you won't be there long. They will. That's how you move. I'm thinking one of your graduates, who I remember the day he started. This is Neal Jacobson. I I remember I do remember the day. I remember the day he started at the company as an assistant in international marketing at Interscope. I was working at Interscope at the time. I was running Geffen Records, and he came in, and full of everything that Neal is full of, right? I'm going to take over the world. Okay, all right, and and he did, and he worked his way, and then it was like a year later, he's like, yeah, I wanted to talk to you. I understand, like, you're really close with Mary J. Blige. I go, yeah, Mary, we have a long history. Good, because I'm taking her on her next European tour. I'm like, what? Yeah, I've got a whole promo tour set up. I'm like, you? Like, you're the... But, and he did that, and he did it successfully, and then he did something else. Then he was like, big guy in the international market, and then he in marketing department, and then he got close with Robin, then he started managing Robin, and then he started, and it all just flowed from there. So it was about being the best that you could be at whatever job you were given is critically important. People notice that. People do notice. No one cares where you went to school. No one cares, really who your parents are. That helps get people in the door, but that doesn't matter once you're in. What matters is how good are you? And people pick up on, like, in a sea of craziness, competent people stand out. Like, you always are like, I don't know who that person is, but that guy who's working with that woman over there, she's lucky. I'm going to tell her because he's great. Like, I'll start using him as an interface. When you find somebody who's particularly like in an admin position who's substantive, it's like, whoa, I don't have to talk to her anymore. I'm just going to talk to him because I know I can get, I can move forward what I need to get done because this person is engaged and understands and cares and is responsive. So that's my advice.
And I just want to ask you kind of one last question. We're into this era now of ever increasing sensitivity toward diversity, and I'm wondering about your thoughts about that. And do our students here who are from diverse populations have a reason to be optimistic about moving into this industry?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because I was actually as I was answering the last one, I was going to try and figure out how to work that in, but you're that good. I'm just going to give it to you straight. As someone who's been in the music business 27 years, I'm very disappointed at the lack of diversity, inclusion, and equity, and I'm going to break it down in our business. Diversity has gotten better. There's more people at the companies that look different and come from different experiences and have different value sets and things like that. But the inclusion, the as you move up the ranks, it is very, very narrow and small. In fact, I read a really interesting article yesterday, I guess it was, in relation to Warner Music as having an IPO, public offering, big deal. Well, so somebody took an angle. That's interesting because they only have, I think, one woman on the board or something, and then they proceed to break down all the companies, and the board, kind of the management boards or boards of directors of at least the three majors. In the last few years, really as a byproduct of the Me Too movement and nothing else, there has been more attention brought to the presence of women in our industry. 51% of the population, and still, not really failing grades in terms of management positions. And similarly, behind that are people from other underrepresented groups. But it is getting better because there is attention. And what we need more than anything is we need all of you to continue to seek out opportunities, now more than ever, because the light has been shining. There's much more attention and much more. It's amazing how that we're still having moments of first impression, but we are still having moments of first impression as an industry, and people realizing, you know what, we do need we do need to look and broaden the pool, and so that's really, really critically important. And then what's happening internally is that we're seeing people get different looks than they would have gotten before, and we're finding people actually opening searches wider and broader, and then finding what amazing prospects there are, because they've never looked or plowed that particular field. So I think that the outlook is good. The track record to date, I'll be the first to say, and I've said this publicly many times, I think is very disappointing, particularly in light of the fact when you look at a company like a record company or a music publishing company and you look at who they're servicing, it's crazy. I mean, music is one of the most diverse, kind of talent bodies you'll ever find. That's why we have genres. I mean, come on. So you have all these artists contributing from around, really, literally, around the spectrum of personality, background, ethnicity, et cetera, gender, and yet we've not been able to get that aligned with what's running management positions in companies like that, but getting better.
Okay. Well, I'm going to turn it open to questions, but I've got one last one for you. This is a softball. What, among all of the accolades and recognitions and words of praise that you've received over the years, what are you most proud of?
That's a great question.
It wasn't a softball?
No. Well, it's like I'm most proud of. My son is here, so I'm not him, but the whole family, right? But I'm most proud of my family that I was able to. I have 4 children and a wife, and it's been, work-life balance is critical. I think it's really, really critical because having, we were talking about this a little bit at lunch. I live in Los Angeles, so I live 10 miles from my office, which can take 90 minutes some nights getting home. So when you walk in the door after 90 minutes on the freeway, and no one, they're glad to see you, but no one really cares what happened in your day. That's really healthy. Like, you need that. Like, no, you don't, because you suddenly leave that behind. They don't know that, this deal fell apart, or, this artist raised hell, or whatever. It's, of course, as they got older and realized I could get tickets, things got a little more dicey. But it's work-life balance is the thing I'm most proud of. I mean, I know you wanted professional accomplishment, sorry. Professional accomplishment, it's, I pride myself on, when I came into business, I got some great advice over the years, and just one thing I want to leave with them: mentorship is critical. Mentorship is critical, and it's great if you can find a mentor that looks like you, or has a background like you, or has had experiences like you. But if you can't, it doesn't matter. Mentorship is really, really important. I had from the day I started in that company, I had some great mentors they were self-appointed. I didn't ask them. They just said, I'm going to take you under my wing. I said, okay. And one of them gave me some great advice. He said, man, let me explain something to you. When you come in this business, you only have your reputation. When you leave this business, you'll leave with your reputation and your contacts. That's it. So when you're here, make sure, if nothing else, that you protect and maintain your reputation. And so I took that and internalized it as, it is very tempting to get through the conversation or get through the interaction, particularly with an artist or their representative, by just telling them what they want to hear. But what I'm pride myself on, and I've kind of made part of my reputation, is I will never tell you I can do something I can't do. So if you're saying, I want X, Y, and Z, or I need this and that, if I can't do it, I'm not going to say, yeah, no problem, that'll be fine, it'll be fine. And it is a lot about striking a balance. Artists sometimes ask for things that are ridiculous, and labels sometimes take positions that are a little old-fashioned and stuck in the mud. So you have to kind of you have to live not in the black or the white, but in the gray. And in doing that, you burn your reputation, you're done. And it's very, very important that you maintain integrity in what you do, and that you maintain integrity with the people that you're working with. So that's my.
Fantastic. All right, well, we got some time for a few questions. Head for the mic, right there in the middle.
Hi. So
Hi.
I'm Franco. I'm a music business student and also a Latinx artist. And following up on what you said about the IPO, how do you think that these companies going public will affect the dynamics of, I guess, the inner workings of the company, especially when it comes to transparency and what information they give to their artists, since now it's going to have to be public?
Great question. I don't think it's going to change all that much. Only a few years ago, Warner was a public company, and then they went private. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, I think we all can figure out why they're going public again, as valuations have increased. But yeah, by being public, the reporting requirements are much greater, and so I think there will be a greater flow of information. Plus, it's interesting. If you look in history. There was a time when Warner Music was part of Time Warner. Many years ago, you probably weren't born, but and that was at a time when Warner Music at that point they were the business partner of Interscope, and Interscope had a little label called Death Row, and they put out some records that were close to the edge of where some people felt the moral, ethical line should be. And it was interesting to see how the shareholders reacted against Warner Music, such that they ultimately had to jettison Interscope. Good for us. Another reason why we're hitting on all cylinders. So there's what comes with being public is sometimes a different level of scrutiny and kind of accountability on the part of the label, which can play both ways. I don't really know. I'm curious to see. We've announced an IPO in 3 years. A lot can happen in 3 years, but nonetheless, so I'm kind of anxious to see what that will mean for us as well.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Hi, thank you for coming.
Thanks.
With the music business changing so quickly, it's imperative to stay on top of the news and what's up to date. So I just wanted to ask, what are your go-to news sources, and what do you trust the most, and what trends are you focused on and looking out for?
Yeah, God, these guys, great questions. Another great question, and you're so right. It's like I get up every morning at 5:30 because the first thing I have to do, I'm not a morning person, and it's only because I live in LA and I always feel behind, but also to read, because it's like, you have to keep up on it every day. So the things I read, every morning are, blog-wise, are like Music Ally, Music Business Worldwide, those two for sure. And then beyond that, it's, a smattering of different things in different places. What I trust the most, it's really hard to say. I think both of those, Ally and Worldwide, do a pretty good job. I used to think, if it's in Forbes, it must be real. But now I've learned that Forbes is picking up a lot of stuff that independent journalists are writing, sometimes properly sourced, sometimes not. So I don't trust everything in Forbes. I used to trust the Wall Street Journal, but the good people there who were writing music have left and gone to other publications. Yeah, you have to, I read it all. in part because if I don't, I'm going to get it from my boss, like, a half hour later going, what does this mean? How could this be? And it's like, well, what, oh my God, it's like Spotify did what? It's like, yeah, I know, we talked about that, and it's fine.
Let me just jump in for a minute, because I want to tell all of you in the car, when we picked up Jeff at his hotel to head over to the restaurant, and his cell phone rang, and it was his boss, Sir Lucian Green. I said, well, I guess you have to take that call.
Yeah,
Point being that they're
it happens
in
several
contact
times
all
in a
the
day.
time.
Yeah, it happens several times in a day. But we're all looking at this stuff, and it's interesting. There's one of our business partners. I'll say them because it's funny because it's so it's almost like a non sequitur. But I've worked with Cash Money for 20 years. Cash Money Records, hip hop label out of then New Orleans. Now they're Miami, but same guys. They send me like blog posts, like at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, of various things happening in the industry. And so you see that the artist / independent label / business partner community, everybody's following the same thing. It's those things are impactful. Oftentimes they're wrong, but they are impactful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, sir. Thank you very much. My name is Ellis Hamilton. I'm a dual major in performance and film scoring. And my question was regarding this section where you mentioned the copyright infringement. So that is, I have been struggling with that almost as a sort of mental block, and that I would be so worried about whether or not I was infringing on somebody's on a song that I would just not write, and as a result, I've left many songs unfinished. And when you mentioned the spirit and style, I began to wonder if my mental block was really, am I infringing, or am I just writing in the spirit and style of something? And so my question is, how can you tell, unless you decide you were going to rip off a song, which I would never do intentionally, how would you differentiate between, am I writing in the spirit and style of something, and is that okay, or am I infringing on something? And how would you suggest I start getting past this self-imposed, if you will, mental block?
Great question again. God, this is, you guys, I feel for the faculty here. But first of all, you've got to get past this mental block, because you do not stifle your creativity because of it. And that's why I'm so passionate on this issue, because, the blurred lines thing I think was just wrong. I don't think that they infringed Marvin Gaye's song. I'm not saying that because, look, we got the Marvin Gaye estate. I'm on both sides, but I do think that spirit and style is important. If I'll use an example, if spirit and style is a problem, then Bruno Mars probably owes Teddy Riley a lot of money. He owes New Edition a lot of money. I mean, he's done a lot of songs that are kind of an homage to the New Jack sound of the late '90s, mid to late '90s. So but we love that, and that's okay. So I think I hear you. You would never intentionally infringe someone's song, and I think that's that should be your guiding source. If under the law, if someone cannot connect you in your process with the alleged, infringed material, excuse me, you should be okay. But, that's part of, that's part of what's happened in some of the, I think that was part of what happened in the Led Zeppelin situation. So, there are services you can go to protect yourself, or try and, that would protect is maybe too strong, but to get another opinion. And I'm not talking musicologists, but, actual, music clearance services where these people are like savants. I mean, there's a woman named Deborah Manis Gardner, DMG. Deborah works she's in Delaware, and I'm telling you, every hip hop record of note goes through her because she not only clears, but she also helps identify. We have people on staff that are just we keep them around because they're just that good. I mean, there's one guy in New York. Whenever Kanye is ready to release, we put him on a plane to Wyoming or Kazakhstan, wherever Kanye is feeling that particular week, and he goes and he sits in a room with him, and Kanye trusts him and he'll play the record for him, and then he'll come back and say, okay, he's got this sample, that's it, because the guy's just a music nut and has his brain works that way and knows a lot of source material. Very imperfect science, but the problem you have is a lot of producers don't even remember what they borrowed from, and that's more samples. What we're talking here is publishing interpolation, which is you really gotta, I think, want to do that. It can't be something that just happens. At least not in the if it does to the extent that it's just something that's in the air, then it shouldn't be liable. But what you should not do, if I were your lawyer or your manager or your friend, you can be friends, don't let that have a chilling effect on your creativity, because you'll be robbing us all of the opportunity to hear what you can do. So.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we need to wrap up pretty soon, but I see 3 in line, so we'll take those 3 and then we'll wrap up. And we've got some food in the back and all that, and I'm sure you're maybe getting hungry.
Thank you for coming. My question is regarding the diversity section of the interview. So I'm an international student from Australia, and I guess as international students, get closer to graduation, we're faced with the dilemma of, do we go back home or do we stay in the States and kind of figure out how we want to go about that section of our kind of career after graduating. So my question more directly is, what is the advice you would give us as international students, as the process of staying in the States is a lot trickier through like visas and finding a place to live and finding where you need to be for your specific, pathway that you want to pursue?
Okay, I know this is a music conversation, but I'm a political person, so it slips in sometimes. If I had a passport that was anything other than the U.S., man, I'd tell you right now, I'd be in Australia, anywhere. I wouldn't be here. So don't make that a reason to stay. But in all seriousness, it's whatever you want to do. I mean, it's a global business. I happen to think the Australia market is really going through some interesting positive stuff right now. I mean, we have a big company there. I was down in Sydney. It was, I guess, about 2 years ago. I went down to Sydney and was very impressed. I came in last night from London. I was in London this past week, and there was the Brit Awards. And I gotta tell you, is it broadcast here? I don't know. I mean, I gotta tell you, it was amazing. It was life-changing for me. And not because we did win a lot, but that's not why. It was just the diversity of the artistry and the level of the artistry was amazing. I mean, the Grammys could take such a lesson. All the U.S. people were like, "Oh my God, the Grammys have to change." It was so incredible, and I'm ecstatic on what's happening with music in the UK right now. So, don't limit yourself. If you want to live here because you like living here, then you should be here. But it won't hinder your opportunities at all. I mean, the heads of the 3 major record companies right now happen to all be from the UK. They all born, raised, grew up in the UK, came over here, are now running companies over here. Very weird time. But so that's really my advice. I know that because we have a lot of international employees, the visa thing's no joke. I mean, it's I had one, in fact, a lawyer who had to leave for a year and go to London because she's some lottery with the visa, and it's a whole weird thing. I didn't really 100% understand it, but she basically got knocked out, so she works out in New York. We let her work out of London for a year, and she still worked for us, and then came back the next year when she got it cleared. So that's a whole thing to worry about, but I think you can, the beauty of today, and something I didn't touch on, is another one of the advantages of this whole globalization the digital thing is the whole globalization of music. I mean, we have a global release date. It's Friday. Everything goes worldwide on Friday. And, 10 years ago, it was like, we're releasing in the U.S. this month. We're going to release in the U.K. and Europe in 6 weeks, and we'll do Japan in 3 months. No, now it's like everything's at the same time, and everybody's hearing everything at the same time, and music is traveling so much faster, and it's crazy, And I mean, Louis Capaldi, he was signed by a German company, not our English company. And like the English guys are looking stupid now. I mean, it's amazing. People are finding music everywhere.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, 2 more quick ones. We really need to wrap this up. So, you're on.
Thank you. I just wanted your opinion on the Taylor Swift deal, and if you think that could reflect a future for artists being able to more easily negotiate to own their masters, or if you think that was very much like a special case and only on that kind of upper level.
It's not an upper case. It's a special case. It was. I think it's more. The like everything in life, the artist representative thing, both on the management and the attorney and sometimes business management side, is very inconsistent. And that leads to a lot of concerns about, transparency and what do we know and are we being taken advantage of? And a lot of times, it's getting very strong and good representation. I think if potentially if she had someone else, it might not have been, the conversation may not have been as elevated. It is wonderful. There's one manager in particular who I enjoy because I can start the conversation. I always say I can start the conversation on like chapter 13 instead of from the beginning of the book because he's facile, very, very facile on digital, and so we can get right to the issues that need to be addressed. So I think it's going to get better. It's to the gentleman's question earlier about the reading and stuff. I mean, there's so much happening so quickly. The advantage of being at a big company like mine is I've got a lot of sources and a lot of staff to help us keep on top of it. But things are changing hourly, and it's tough to stay on top of it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, thanks for being here again. The main thing that I'm wondering is you've seen so much, you've been a big part of the industry for a really long time, and as you said, there's been some huge changes in the industry through Napster and the collapsing of a lot of different parts of the industry. I'm curious about your thoughts or predictions of the things that are on the horizon for the industry. Like, what is the big next step? What is the next thing that we'll all be a part of in 5 to 10 years?
If I knew, I would have my own IPO. But I'll tell you this. The only thing constant in this business is change. What is really interesting, though, is we had starting with vinyl, then to 8-track cassette, to CD, to downloads. There's been a progression that has been like 10 years at a different or more, vinyl's been a long time, at a format where we've kind of locked in. Streaming is not going to be that way. Streaming is not going to be that. We're not going to be, this is what we're doing. We're going to just stream, and there's going to be playlists for 10 years. Now you can already see it. I don't know exactly what the next big thing is, but when you look around and you see things like, where the growth of TikTok in 1 year is scary, but great. It's always this weird kind of thing. You're like petrified, but it's also really cool, right? And it's a great way to discover artists. But are they paying us enough? It's these weird things. Smart speakers. Okay, we all got an Alexa and said, yeah, it's kind of cool. But now you're realizing, holy crap! I mean, Alexa. I saw a number the other day. I can't remember what it was, but the number of those units that are sold and the number of subscriptions that have come out of it. It's fascinating. I mean, it's huge, and not just Alexa, but all everyone's got one now, and the different companies. So that's a real thing. Wearables is huge. These whether it's from the watches to the Fitbit type things, they're all music consumers. That the consuming devices is so everywhere. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't think we can, we can all predict and prognosticate, but I don't think it's going to. I do think what you will see is, where the growth is going to come in our business in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be China, India, Africa, Latin America, those territories there's 1.3 billion people in China, a little more than that in India. I mean, we're like, not even close, 300 million or something, right? So, you look at the size of that as those markets are coming online digital first, and what services will proliferate there. The one thing, what we do know is it's, gone are the days, not gone, but I was going to say gone are the days of the album, but everyone gets upset. Okay. The album still matters, but there's different ways of consuming music, and that's all okay. Some people like songs, some like albums, some like laid back, some like lean in, some like playlists, some like whatever. But people like portions of songs, and what we know is fans like to touch and play and alter they like to do things. They like to be interactive. That's why TikTok works so much, right? I got a 13-year-old daughter. She makes 30 of them a day. Now, seriously, I mean, am I wrong? Okay. And it's like, it's insanity. And user-generated content is just a really big concept that, don't run from it, lean into it, right? So that's what people want. I don't know where it's going, but it's going to be, I think it's going to be very smart and intelligent. AI is a real, it keeps me up at night, but then again, it's kind of cool. I saw a presentation when where's the woman when I was in Sydney. There's a great company down there, AI company, and they made a presentation, and they had a song that was AI computer generated, and they broke it down by each instrument. It was fabulous. It's a classical thing. Then they did a contemporary song. Then they blew me away when they had AI voice. You would not have known. You would not have known. And then there's a whole debate. The lawyer in me is like, what is, the whole how does copyright apply to AI? Real tough issue. So it's whatever it is, it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be big and good, and continue to grow the category. So.
True that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's say thanks to Jeff.
Thank you. Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
You mentioned, I started 27 years ago. You started this 27 years ago. I do feel I'm 29. Okay, 29, not even 27. Okay, I am really honored to be here on what is the last one of these Zafris lectures that you'll be moderating, hosting, and I want to thank you, Don, for inviting me to be here, and I want to thank you for doing this. This is incredible.
If you just stay in your seats for a minute, because we want to do one more thing here. Jeff, please come out. We have this for Jeff. I'm going to read it to you. Presented to Jeff Harleston by the Music Business Management Department in recognition of his outstanding contribution to music business education, February 21, 2020. We always balance the formal with the informal. So Jeff,
Oh. Talk to somebody.
knowing you're from LA, but maybe you'll find the time to
Oh no, this is. I actually got dressed up for you guys. They don't